And the second thing is I would worry a little bit less about information freedom, because I don't think that that's the future that we've gotten, and I think even the places that have gotten that are beginning to show some signs of shifting away from it. And then the third thing is that I would worry a lot more about forward security, that I think this is going to become more and more important as we move forward. In 2004, Nikita Borisov, Ian Goldberg, and Eric Brewer wrote a paper called Off-the-Record Communication, or Why Not to Use PGP. And their observation was pretty straightforward. What they noticed was that if you look at how PGP works, probably, almost seems like almost nobody uses PGP, but most people know how it works, right? Which is, let's say that I want to send an email to Bob. I get Bob's public key, and I encrypt my email with Bob's public key, and then I send it to Bob. If I want to send another email to Bob, I use Bob's same public key, encrypt that email, send it to Bob, on and on and on. And the problem is that if at any point Bob's public key is compromised, then every email that you've ever sent using that key is now also compromised. That if I send an email to Bob today, it is secure, but if even 20 years in the future someone manages to compromise Bob's public key, that email is now lost. So the big problem is that one key compromise affects all previous correspondence. The second problem is that you're in this weird situation where the secrecy of what I write is dependent on your security practices, which is kind of the opposite of what I want, I'm pretty paranoid. I have what I think are stringent security practices, but I don't really know if that's true for the people that I'm corresponding with. I would like for my security practices to protect the secrecy of the things that I'm writing. And the third problem is that you have authenticity with protocols like PGP, but you don't have deniability. And so what that means is that if I write this message, hey Bob, I was thinking that Eve is a real jerk, if at any point that message is compromised, there's no way for me to deny it. I absolutely wrote this. That's partially nice, right? Because Bob received this message and he knows that it came from me. But I would like for Bob to know that it came from me, but also to be able to at some point say, that wasn't really me. But the problem is that it's undeniable as it is. And so what these cryptographers were proposing in their paper was something called off-the-record messaging. And the way that this works is that everyone continues to have their public-private key pair, as we're familiar with. But the difference is that those key pairs are never used to encrypt actual data. Instead, they're only used to sign an ephemeral key exchange that you do between both parties. So Alice and Bob exchange ephemeral keys, which they sign using their key pair, so that you know that you have authenticity, you're really talking to the right person. Then you use that ephemeral key pair to actually exchange messages. And what you do is that every time you exchange a message, you also include half of a key exchange, one part of the key exchange. So appended, prepended, or embedded in your message is also a key exchange, which means that every time you exchange messages, you get a new key exchange, which means that the key that you're using to exchange messages can continue rolling forward. And so not only are you using ephemeral keys, but also every time you exchange a message, you have a new key that is constantly rolling forward. So there's not any one key that can ever be compromised to affect all of your previous messages, because that key is constantly changing and it's never stored anywhere permanently. Furthermore, so you have a message, it's encrypted with this session key. And instead of using digital signatures to authenticate that message, you use a message authentication code. And the message authentication code is keyed off of the session key. It's a derivative of the session key. So the signatures are undeniable because they only have one possible author. But Macs have two possible authors, right? Because two possible people know the key that is used to construct the Mac, both Alice and Bob. So if Bob receives a message, he knows that either he wrote it or Alice wrote it. And since he knows that he didn't write it, he knows it was Alice. But if at any point he presents this message and says, Alice wrote this, isn't it fucked up? That Alice can say, no, that was Bob. And there's no way for anyone to differentiate whether it was one or the other. What's more, since this message authentication key is a derivative of the session key, and the session key is constantly rolling forward, it means that the MAC keys are constantly rolling forward as well. And once you've rolled forward to a new MAC key, it is no longer sensitive. The old one can be given away. It doesn't matter if you keep it secret or not. And so they explicitly publish it openly in the clear in this protocol. So every time a MAC key becomes obsolete, they publish it widely, which means that now anyone could potentially have been watching this thing and can use an old MAC key to modify or forge an old message, which means that this cannot be used to inject new messages, which would be received by Bob and authenticated as secure because they've moved on to a new MAC key. But if someone presents a message, hey, Alice wrote this, isn't it fucked up? You can say not only, well, it might have been Bob, but also it could have been anybody. Any potential eavesdropper could have constructed this message. So now we have authenticity, and we have a really strong notion of deniability. So the nice thing about OTR is that one key compromise does not affect all previous messages, but also that you get authenticity and deniability. So I think that protocols like this are going to be very important in the future. That as we move forward, anytime we see secure protocols, the first thing we should say is this forward secure? Because we're moving into this world where key disclosure is becoming more and more of an issue. So another project that I've started with people from the Institute for Disruptive Studies is this project called Whisper Systems. And what we're trying to do is combine forward secure protocols into mobile phones, which are sort of these two trends that I'm interested in working on in the future. This place where we're asked to make this choice that I think isn't really a choice, and also where forward secure protocols are going to become more and more important. So the two things that we're working on right now are first a encrypted voice application that uses forward secure protocols. And we're writing this for Android, just because it's the easiest thing to do at first. And there are other encrypted voice applications that have been on the market for a while. But what we want to do is distribute something for free that is extremely, extremely easy to use. That we want this to be as easy to use as making a normal phone call. That it should be integrated into your existing dialer on your smartphone. That all the addressing should be based on existing phone numbers, and that it should be as easy or easier to make a secure call than just to make a normal call. The way that this works is by using the data channel, either Wi-Fi or 3G, to actually transmit the voice communication. And so there's this question, doesn't VoIP suck? And the answer is usually yes, but the reason that I think it sucks usually comes down to signaling. So normally in some VoIP situation, you have two parties that are trying to communicate, and you also have to have some VoIP server, like an asterisk machine that is handling the signaling. And this means that you have to maintain a connection, like a TCP connection or a UDP connection, to your VoIP server at all times. And in the context of the mobile environment, this is really can be sort of deadly. Because now you have to maintain a constantly open connection to some server somewhere on the internet, which means your phone can't ever go to sleep. And it also means that as you're sort of moving around, you might go in and out of network connectivity, the connections could break, one party might not notice that the connection is broken, and now you have this sort of half-open situation, and things start to work poorly. So what we've decided is that in the mobile environment, a lot of the signaling can actually be pushed onto the existing signaling infrastructure that is used for telecommunications. That there's this really nice signaling mechanism, it's called the phone company, they know how to address devices on their network, and they're pretty good at it. And so what we're trying to do is leverage that existing thing to use the signaling in our application. And so initially what we're doing is using the signaling using SMS. So whenever you want to signal another phone, you just send them an SMS message, and they pull your information out of that and connect back over the data channel to your phone directly. So you have this point-to-point mobile voice connection, and you don't need any long-running connections to some asterisk server somewhere with some username configured that probably won't work. So the upsides are that your phone doesn't need to maintain a constant network connection, which means your phone could go to sleep. You don't need the equivalent of a Skype ID or a Fring ID or any of these things. Your phone number is your phone number. That's how you're addressed. If you know someone's phone number, you know how to call them securely. And that you don't need to run a VoIP server, right? You don't need some server or some hardware anywhere. You just install the app, and now you're ready to go. You're ready to make secure calls.